The rain pounded against the pavement like angry fists from the sky. Sarah stood on the doorstep, clutching her 3-day-old baby girl against her chest, trying to shield the tiny, fragile life from the freezing water that soaked through her thin hospital gown. "Please, Marcus. Please don't do this," she screamed, her voice breaking as tears mixed with the rain streaming down her face. "She's your daughter. Our baby." Marcus stood in the doorway of their small apartment, his face twisted with anger and disgust. His mother, Patricia, stood behind him with her arms crossed, a cruel smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Get out," Marcus shouted, his finger pointing down the dark street. "You and that thing. I don't want to see either of you ever again." Sarah's legs felt weak. She had just given birth 3 days ago. Her body was still healing, still in pain. The baby, little Emma, began to cry, a tiny, helpless sound that broke through the thunder rumbling overhead. "Marcus, I just had surgery. I can barely walk. Where am I supposed to go?" Sarah begged, her voice desperate. "That's not my problem anymore." Marcus spat. "You lied to me. You trapped me. My mother was right about you all along." Patricia stepped forward, her eyes cold as ice. "My son deserves better than a gold-digging nobody like you," she hissed. "You thought you could trap him with that baby? Well, guess what? We know the truth now." Sarah's heart shattered into a million pieces. "What truth?" "Emma is his daughter. I've never lied to you." But before she could say another word, Marcus grabbed her small suitcase, the one she'd taken to the hospital, and threw it into the rain. Her clothes, her documents, everything scattered across the wet ground. Then he slammed the door. The sound echoed through the empty street like a gunshot. Sarah stood there, frozen, holding her crying baby, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. But what Marcus didn't know, what nobody knew, was that at that exact moment, 3,000 miles away, Sarah's name had just been read aloud in a lawyer's office as the sole heir to the Montgomery fortune. A billion-dollar empire. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments. And if you want to know what happens next, keep watching. 6 months earlier, life was completely different for Sarah Mitchell. She worked as a waitress at Danny's Diner, a small restaurant on the corner of 5th and Main Street in the city. The pay wasn't great, barely enough to cover her tiny studio apartment and groceries, but Sarah never complained. She was grateful to have a job, grateful to be alive, grateful for every small blessing. Sarah had grown up in foster care. She never knew her real parents. All she had was a faded photograph of a woman with kind eyes. Someone told her it was her mother, but she had no name, no information, nothing to help her find where she came from. For 23 years, Sarah had been alone in this world. But she never let that make her bitter. Instead, she filled her heart with kindness. She was the type of person who would give her last dollar to someone who needed it more. She smiled at strangers, helped elderly people carry their groceries, and always left encouraging notes for her coworkers. "You're too nice for your own good," her friend Lisa would tell her. Lisa worked at the diner too, and she was the closest thing Sarah had to family. "Maybe," Sarah would laugh, "but being kind doesn't cost anything." And then one rainy evening, so similar to the night she would later be kicked out, everything changed. Marcus Walker walked into Danny's Diner. He was handsome, there was no denying that. Tall, with dark hair perfectly styled, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the humble diner. He carried himself with confidence, the kind that comes from a life where doors always opened, where people always said yes. Sarah was assigned to his table. "Hi, welcome to Danny's. What can I get for you tonight?" she asked with her usual bright smile. Marcus looked up from his phone, and for a moment, their eyes met. His expression softened just slightly. "Coffee, black, and whatever your special is tonight," he said, his voice smooth but tired. "Coming right up." Sarah chirped and hurried to the kitchen. She brought him the meatloaf special, Danny's famous recipe, and a steaming cup of coffee. Marcus took one bite and his eyebrows raised. "This is actually really good," Sarah beamed. "Danny's been making that recipe for 30 years. Secret ingredient. She winked playfully. Marcus found himself smiling. A real smile, not the fake ones he wore at business meetings. What's the secret? Sarah leaned in like she was about to share classified information. Love, she whispered. Danny says every dish needs to be made with love. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in weeks. That's the cheesiest thing I've ever heard. But it's true. Sarah insisted, her eyes sparkling. And just like that, Marcus was hooked. He came back the next night. And the night after that. And the night after that. Always asking for Sarah's section. Always staying longer than necessary. Always finding reasons to talk to her about everything and nothing. Why do you work here? He asked one evening. You seem too smart for this. Sarah shrugged, not offended at all. I'm saving money. I want to go to community college, maybe study nursing. I like helping people. That's really admirable, Marcus said, and he meant it. For weeks, this continued. Marcus would come in, they would talk, and slowly something began to grow between them. Sarah knew she was falling for him. How could she not? He was charming, attentive, interested in everything she had to say. He made her feel special, like she mattered. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus was lying about almost everything. He told her he was a business consultant, which was technically true, but he left out the part where he was the son of Patricia Walker, one of the wealthiest real estate developers in the state. He told her he lived in a modest apartment, neglecting to mention it was a penthouse worth $3 million. He told her he valued simple things, while secretly being disgusted by the diner, by Sarah's cheap clothes, by everything that represented a life so different from his own. But Marcus had a problem. His mother, Patricia, controlled everything, his money, his career, his entire life. She had chosen a woman for him to marry, Victoria Ashford, the daughter of another wealthy family. The marriage was arranged, strategic, all about business and maintaining power. Marcus hated it. He hated Victoria, who was cold and calculating. He hated his mother's control. He hated his entire suffocating life. So when he met Sarah, sweet, genuine, kind Sarah, he saw an escape. Not because he truly loved her, but because she was different. Because being with her felt like rebellion. Because for a few hours every evening, he could pretend to be someone else. Will you go out with me? Marcus finally asked one night, 2 months after they'd met. Like, on a real date? Sarah's face lit up like fireworks. Really? Yes. Yes, of course. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant. Sarah wore her nicest dress, which she'd bought secondhand for $12, and Marcus thought she looked beautiful in a simple, uncomplicated way that the women in his usual circles never did. They talked for hours. Sarah told him about growing up in foster care, about her dreams, about how she wanted to make a difference in the world someday. Marcus told her carefully edited versions of his life, painting himself as a self-made man working his way up, someone who understood struggle. It was all a lie, but Sarah believed every word because she trusted people, because she saw the good in everyone. 6 weeks later, Marcus asked her to move in with him. Are you sure? Sarah asked, nervous and excited. I mean, we haven't been together that long. I've never been more sure of anything, Marcus said, taking her hands. You're different from anyone I've ever met. You're real. Sarah's heart soared. Finally. She had someone. She had a home. She had love. She moved into Marcus's apartment, though she had no idea it was actually a penthouse because Marcus had carefully hidden the most obvious signs of his wealth. He told her it was company housing, and she believed him. For 3 months they were happy. At least Sarah was happy. Marcus was comfortable. Sarah cooked for him, cleaned, took care of him, and asked for nothing in return. It was easy. She didn't demand expensive dates or designer gifts. She was content with movie nights at home and walks in the park. But Marcus was living a double life. During the day, he went to work at his mother's company. He attended business meetings. He had lunch with Victoria, his arranged fiancée, because his mother insisted the merger was still happening. It's just business, his mother would say. You can have your little diner girl for fun, But you'll marry Victoria. That's final. Marcus told himself he would figure it out. That he would somehow break free. That he could have both lives. And then Sarah got pregnant. She found out on a Tuesday morning. She'd been feeling sick for weeks. Exhausted, nauseous, dizzy. At first, she thought it was just stress from picking up extra shifts at the diner. But then she missed her period. And then another week passed. Terrified, Sarah bought a pregnancy test at the pharmacy. She waited until Marcus left for work, then locked herself in the bathroom with shaking hands. 3 minutes later, she stared at the 2 pink lines. Positive. Sarah's mind raced. She was pregnant. She was going to have a baby. Marcus's baby. Part of her was scared. They weren't married. She had no money. How would they afford this? But another part of her, a deeper part, felt a joy she'd never experienced before. She wouldn't be alone anymore. She would have a family. A real family of her own. She couldn't wait to tell Marcus. Surely he would be happy too. Surely this would bring them even closer together. That evening, Sarah cooked Marcus's favorite meal. She set the table with candles and wore the pretty dress he'd complimented her on once. When Marcus came home, he was distracted, stressed, barely noticed the effort she'd made. "Hey, rough day," he muttered, loosening his tie. "I'm exhausted." "I made your favorite," Sarah said softly, her heart pounding. They sat down to eat. Sarah could barely touch her food. Her hands were trembling. "Marcus," she began, her voice nervous. "I have something to tell you." He looked up, chewing. "What?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The fork in Marcus's hand froze halfway to his mouth. Time seemed to stop. "You're... what?" he said slowly. "I'm pregnant," Sarah repeated, her smile hopeful but uncertain. "We're going to have a baby." Marcus set down his fork very carefully. His face had gone completely pale. "How far along?" he asked, his voice tight. "About 8 weeks, I think. I have a doctor's appointment next week to confirm and—" "8 weeks," Marcus interrupted. His mind was racing, calculating. 8 weeks ago, his mother had been pressuring him harder than ever about marrying Victoria. 8 weeks ago, Victoria's father had started talking about the business merger that would make both families even wealthier. 8 weeks ago, Marcus had still been living his double life, thinking he could keep both worlds separate forever. "Are you sure it's mine?" The words came out before he could stop them. Sarah's face crumbled. "What?" "Marcus, of course it's yours. How could you even ask that?" I need to think," Marcus said, standing up abruptly. "This is a lot. I know it's unexpected. But, Sarah, I need space. I'm going out." And he left. He just walked out the door, leaving Sarah sitting at the table with the candles slowly burning down, tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed against her stomach where their baby was growing. Marcus didn't come home that night. He went to his mother's house, the massive estate where he'd grown up, where Patricia Walker ruled like a queen. "Mother, we need to talk," Marcus said the moment she opened the door. Patricia took one look at her son's face and knew something was wrong. She led him to her study, poured them both a drink, and waited. "She's pregnant," Marcus said flatly. Patricia's hand tightened around her glass. "The waitress. Her name is Sarah. And yes. And you're sure it's yours?" Marcus hesitated, that same terrible doubt that had made him ask Sarah the unforgivable question. I think so." Patricia's mind worked quickly. This was a disaster. If word got out that her son had gotten some nobody pregnant, the Ashford deal would fall apart. All her careful planning, all the arrangements, everything would be ruined. "How much does she know about you?" Patricia asked carefully. "Nothing. She thinks I'm just a regular guy with a regular job." "Good. That's good." Patricia began pacing. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go back there and tell her you'll support her through the pregnancy. Be attentive, caring, whatever. But you need to buy me time." "Time for what?" "To fix this. To make her go away." "Mother." "Marcus, listen to me." Patricia grabbed her son's shoulders, forcing him to look at her. "Do you want to lose everything? Your inheritance? Your position in the company? Your entire future? Because that's what will happen if you don't do exactly as I say. Marcus's resolve crumbled. He'd never been strong enough to stand up to his mother. Not really. What do you want me to do? He asked quietly. Patricia smiled, cold and calculating. Leave it to me. Just go back to her. Pretend everything is fine, and wait for my call. Marcus returned home at 3 in the morning. Sarah was still awake, sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. Where were you? She whispered. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and he did look genuinely remorseful. I just needed to clear my head. It's big news. Are you happy about the baby? Sarah asked, her voice small and afraid. Marcus sat down beside her and took her hand. The lie came easily. He'd been lying for months, after all. I was just shocked, he said. But yes, I'm happy. We'll figure this out together. Sarah collapsed against him in relief, sobbing. I was so scared. I thought you didn't want the baby. I thought you didn't want me anymore. Never, Marcus said, holding her. I'm not going anywhere. Another lie. Because 3 days later, Patricia put her plan into motion. She hired a private investigator to dig into Sarah's past. She wanted dirt. Anything she could use to drive a wedge between Sarah and Marcus. But Sarah's life was an open book. No criminal record. No scandals. Just 23 years of being shuffled through foster homes and working honest jobs. Frustrated, Patricia changed tactics. She created dirt instead. Using her connections, Patricia had fake documents created, bank statements showing large deposits into Sarah's account, photoshopped images of Sarah with other men, fabricated text messages. It was all fake, all lies, but it looked real. Very real. Patricia waited for the perfect moment. When Sarah was 7 months pregnant, huge and uncomfortable, completely dependent on Marcus. That's when she struck. She invited Marcus to lunch at her country club. She laid out the evidence across the table like a prosecutor presenting a case. Look at this, Patricia said, sliding papers across. Look at what your girlfriend has been doing behind your back. Marcus stared at the bank statements showing $50,000 in deposits to Sarah's account. What is this? Money from various men. Look at the dates. They all correspond with times you were away on business. But Sarah doesn't even have a bank account with this much. She has a secret account. Look, Patricia showed him more documents. And here are the photos. Marcus felt sick looking at the obviously fake but convincing photos of Sarah with other men. His rational mind knew something was off. Sarah barely left the apartment anymore because of the pregnancy. She had no money for nice restaurants or hotels like in these photos, but his mother's voice was so certain, so convincing. She's been using you, Marcus. The baby probably isn't even yours. She saw you as a meal ticket and now she's trapped you. I don't. Sarah wouldn't. But doubt had crept in. Son, I know this is hard, but you need to protect yourself. Before it's too late. Patricia had planted the seed. Now she just needed to water it. Over the next 2 months, she worked on Marcus constantly, sending him articles about paternity fraud, sharing stories of men who'd been trapped by scheming women, always gentle, always concerned, always poisoning his mind against Sarah. Marcus started seeing things that weren't there. When Sarah smiled at the delivery man, Marcus thought she was flirting. When Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, Marcus was convinced it was another man. The trust was eroding. Sarah noticed the change but couldn't understand it. Marcus became cold, distant. He barely touched her anymore. He looked at her with suspicion. Is everything okay? She would ask, her hand on her swollen belly. Fine, Marcus would lie. But nothing was fine. And then Sarah went into labor. It happened 2 weeks early, in the middle of the night. Sarah woke up to intense pain and fluid soaking the bed. Marcus, something's wrong, she gasped. I think the baby's coming. Marcus drove her to the hospital in silence. No comforting words. No hand-holding. Just cold, mechanical duty. The labor was difficult. 20 hours of excruciating pain. The baby was in distress. Eventually, the doctors had to perform an emergency C-section. But baby Emma was born healthy. 6 pounds, 3 ounces, with a tiny tuft of dark hair and the most perfect little face Sarah had ever seen. "She's beautiful," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as they placed the baby in her arms. Marcus looked at his daughter and felt nothing. His mother's poison had done its work. All he could think was, "Is she even mine?" "I'm going to get some air," Marcus said and left the room. He didn't come back for 6 hours. 3 days later, Sarah was released from the hospital. She was still in significant pain from the surgery. The doctors told her to rest, to not lift anything heavy, to take it easy while her body healed. Marcus picked her up in stony silence and drove her home. When they arrived at the apartment, Sarah was surprised to see Patricia there, waiting in the living room. "Hello, dear," Patricia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I came to help you with the baby." "Oh, that's very kind," Sarah said, confused. Patricia had never been kind to her before. In fact, Patricia had made it clear she thought Sarah wasn't good enough for her son. "Marcus, honey, can you help me in the kitchen for a moment?" Patricia said. They disappeared, leaving Sarah alone with baby Emma, who was sleeping peacefully in her car seat. In the kitchen, Patricia handed Marcus a manila envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it." Inside was a document, a paternity test result. It said Marcus was not the father of baby Emma. The test was fake, completely fabricated. But Marcus didn't know that. He stared at the paper, his hands shaking. "I had the hospital run the test while Sarah was unconscious," Patricia lied smoothly. "I'm sorry, son. I know this is hard. But you needed to know the truth." Something broke inside Marcus in that moment. All the doubts, all the suspicions, all the poison came together in a perfect storm of rage and betrayal. He walked back into the living room where Sarah was adjusting Emma's blanket, humming softly to her baby. "Get out," Marcus said. Sarah looked up, confused. "What?" "I said get out," Marcus shouted, and Sarah flinched. That's when Patricia stepped in, her face a mask of fake concern and real cruelty. "Marcus, don't yell at the poor girl. Just explain to her that she needs to leave." "What's happening?" Sarah's voice was shaking. "Marcus, what's going on?" "You lied to me," Marcus said coldly. "About everything. That baby isn't mine." Sarah's face went white. "What?" "Marcus, of course she's yours. I've never been with anyone else. Ever. Don't lie to me," Marcus roared. "I have proof. I know what you've been doing. I know about the money, the men, everything." "What money? What men?" "Marcus, I don't understand." Sarah was crying now, clutching Emma close to her chest. Patricia stepped forward. "Dear, it's better if you just go quietly. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. Emma is Marcus's daughter." Sarah looked desperately at Marcus, the man she loved, the father of her child. "Please, Marcus, please believe me. I don't know what she told you, but it's not true. None of it is true. I've seen the evidence," Marcus said, his voice like ice. "The bank statements, the photos, the paternity test." "What paternity test? I never agreed to any test. I had it done at the hospital while you were under anesthesia," Patricia said smugly. "That's illegal. You can't do that without my consent." Sarah's legal knowledge was limited, but she knew that much. "Can't I?" Patricia's smile was cruel. "Who do you think they'll believe? A nobody with no family, no money, no proof of anything? Or me?" Sarah realized in that moment that this was a setup. That somehow, Patricia had manufactured all of this to destroy her. "Marcus, please," Sarah begged one last time. "Look at her. Look at Emma. She has your eyes. She has your chin. She's your daughter. I swear on my life, she's your daughter." For just a second, just one brief second, Marcus hesitated. He looked at the tiny baby in Sarah's arms, at her little face, and he saw something. A resemblance? His mother's nose? His own dark hair? But then Patricia put her hand on his shoulder. Don't let her manipulate you, son. This is what these women do. And the moment passed. Pack your things and get out, Marcus said flatly. You have 5 minutes. Sarah couldn't believe this was happening. She had just had major surgery 3 days ago. She could barely walk without pain. She had a newborn baby, and he was throwing her out? Marcus, I just had a C-section. I'm still healing. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. Sarah looked around desperately. Everything in the apartment was Marcus's. She had no money. She'd quit her job at the diner in her 7th month because the pregnancy had become high risk and the doctor ordered bed rest. She had nothing. No savings. No family. No friends nearby. Lisa had moved to another state 2 months ago for a better job. She had absolutely nothing and nowhere to go. Please, Sarah whispered. Please don't do this. Not now. At least let me stay until I heal. Then I'll leave. I promise. No, Patricia said firmly. You'll leave now. Marcus, get her suitcase. Marcus, under his mother's control, driven by manufactured betrayal, grabbed the small suitcase Sarah had taken to the hospital. It contained 1 change of clothes, some toiletries, and Emma's going-home outfit. He threw it toward the door. Get out, he said again. Sarah realized she had no choice. With tears streaming down her face, she carefully picked up Emma's car seat with one hand, sending sharp pain through her healing incision, and her small purse with the other. She walked slowly toward the door, each step agony. Marcus, she said one last time, turning back to look at him. I love you, and Emma loves you. When you figure out the truth, and you will someday, I hope you can forgive yourself for this. Just go, Marcus said, but he wouldn't look at her. Patricia opened the door with a triumphant smile. And that's when the rain started. The storm had rolled in with frightening speed. Within seconds, the rain went from a sprinkle to a downpour. Sarah stood on the doorstep, looking out at the dark, wet street. Water was already pooling on the sidewalks. Marcus, please, she tried one more time. At least let me call a cab. At least let me wait inside until. But Marcus reached out and pushed her. Not hard, but hard enough. Sarah stumbled backward onto the step, crying out as pain shot through her surgery site. She nearly dropped Emma's car seat but caught it at the last second. Get out! Marcus grabbed her suitcase and hurled it into the rain. The zipper broke on impact, and her few belongings scattered across the wet ground. Then he slammed the door. The lock clicked, and Sarah was alone in the rain with her 3-day-old baby. For a moment, she just stood there, unable to process what had just happened. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. But the cold rain soaking through her clothes was very real. Emma's cries were very real. The pain in her body was very real. Sarah tried the door. Marcus, please. Nothing. She looked up and saw Patricia watching from the window, her face cold and satisfied. Sarah had no phone. It had been in her purse, but in the chaos, she'd left it inside. She had no money except $7 in her purse. She had nowhere to go. So she did the only thing she could do. She picked up what belongings she could salvage from the rain, held Emma's car seat close to protect her baby from the storm, and started walking. She had no idea where she was going. She just walked. The rain pounded down harder. Sarah's hospital gown. She'd never even had time to change into real clothes, was completely soaked. Her hair plastered to her face. Her body screaming in pain with every step. But she kept walking, whispering to Emma, "It's okay, baby. Mama's got you. Mama will protect you. I promise." Emma cried and cried, scared by the storm, hungry, needing to be changed. Sarah's strength was fading. Blood had started seeping through her clothes. Her incision was bleeding from the exertion and the stress. She needed help. She needed shelter. She stumbled toward a 24-hour convenience store 2 blocks away. She'd walked past it 100 times when she lived in the neighborhood. The clerk, a kind older man named Mr. Chun, looked up when the door chimed and gasped at the sight before him. A woman, soaked to the bone, bleeding, clutching a crying newborn baby, swaying on her feet like she might collapse at any moment. "Miss," Miss, are you okay? Mr. Chun rushed from behind the counter. I need to call. Sarah's voice was weak. And then her legs gave out. Mr. Chun caught her before she hit the ground. Call 911, he shouted to the other clerk. Now! The last thing Sarah saw before she passed out was Emma's little face, still crying, still needing her mama. And the last thought she had was, what did I do to deserve this? What Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that at that exact moment, 3,000 miles away in a law office in New York City, an elderly lawyer named Richard Montgomery was reading a will. And to my granddaughter, Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery, born March 15th and placed for adoption on March 18th, I leave my entire estate, including all assets, properties, and controlling shares of Montgomery Enterprises, valued at approximately $1.2 billion. The room full of distant relatives gasped in outrage. Who the hell is Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery? One of them demanded. According to the instructions left by Mr. Montgomery, she is his granddaughter, the daughter of his son, David, and David's girlfriend, Elizabeth. They died in a car accident when the baby was only 3 days old. Mr. Montgomery tried to find the child at the time, but the adoption records were sealed. He spent the last 24 years searching for her. He hired investigators, paid for DNA databases, everything. And 3 months ago, we finally found her. 3 months ago? Why didn't you contact her then? We did. We sent letters to her last known address. But she never responded. We suspect she never received them. We've been trying to locate her current whereabouts, but she seems to have moved. Because Sarah had moved from her studio apartment to Marcus's place, and the letters had been returned as addressee unknown. Well, find her, the lawyer said firmly. Mr. Montgomery's will is clear. Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery inherits everything. She is now one of the wealthiest young women in America. And if you can't find her, we'll keep searching until we do, even if it takes years. Those were Mr. Montgomery's instructions. One of the investigators on the case spoke up. Sir, I may have a lead. We tracked her to a hospital here in the city. She gave birth 3 days ago. 3 days ago? Then we need to move quickly. Find her. Find Sarah Montgomery. But Sarah wasn't at her old address. She wasn't at the hospital. She wasn't anywhere they expected her to be. She was passed out on the floor of a convenience store, bleeding and broken, with her newborn baby crying beside her, having just been thrown out by the man she loved. The man who had no idea he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because Sarah, sweet, kind, penniless Sarah, was now worth more than Marcus and his mother could ever dream of. But she didn't know it yet, and neither did Marcus. All Marcus knew, as he stood in his apartment listening to his mother praise him for doing the right thing, was that he felt empty, hollow, wrong. He walked to the window and looked out at the rain. Somewhere out there, Sarah was walking in that storm with their baby. No, he told himself firmly, not my baby. The test proved it. But even as he thought it, a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered, what if you're wrong? Marcus pushed the thought away and turned from the window. He didn't know that somewhere in that rainy darkness, his entire world was about to change. He didn't know that the woman he'd just thrown away was about to become the most powerful person in his city. He didn't know that his cruel decision tonight would haunt him for the rest of his life. All he knew was that his mother was saying something about making him breakfast, and he should probably answer her. So he did. And outside, the rain kept falling, and Sarah kept bleeding, and baby Emma kept crying, and the wheels of fate kept turning, preparing to deliver justice in the most unexpected way possible. The wail of the ambulance sirens cut through the storm like a knife. Sarah's eyes fluttered open to find herself lying on the cold floor of the convenience store, her vision blurry and her body feeling like it was on fire. She could hear Emma crying somewhere nearby, and panic shot through her like electricity. Emma! She gasped, trying to sit up. My baby! Where's my baby? Shoo! Stay still, a gentle voice said. A paramedic, a woman with kind eyes, knelt beside her. Your baby is right here. She's okay. But you're not. You're bleeding badly. Sarah turned her head and saw Mr. Chun holding Emma's car seat, gently rocking it, trying to soothe the crying infant. Relief flooded through her even as pain consumed her body. "Ma'am, we need to get you to the hospital immediately," the male paramedic said urgently. "Your C-section incision has torn open. You need surgery." "No," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "No hospital. I can't pay for it. I don't have insurance anymore. I don't have anything." The female paramedic's expression softened with sympathy. "Ma'am, that doesn't matter right now. You could die if we don't get you help. Your baby needs you alive." At those words, "Your baby needs you," Sarah's resistance crumbled. She nodded weakly. They lifted her onto the stretcher, and Mr. Chun carefully handed Emma's car seat to the paramedic. "Wait," Sarah called out weakly to Mr. Chun. "My things? My suitcase. I'll keep them safe for you," Mr. Chun promised, his eyes misty. "You just focus on getting better, young lady. You come back when you're well, okay? I'll have everything waiting." Sarah nodded, too weak to speak, and they loaded her into the ambulance. As they rushed through the rain-soaked streets toward the hospital, Sarah held Emma's tiny hand and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby girl. I'm so sorry. This is your welcome to the world. But I promise you, I promise, I'm going to make everything okay." Somehow, she had no idea how she would keep that promise. But she was determined to try. 3 weeks later, Richard Montgomery's law office was in chaos. "What do you mean you still can't find her?" The elderly lawyer thundered at the team of investigators gathered in his conference room. "We have her name. We have her last known address. We have hospital records showing she gave birth. How can one woman just disappear?" "Sir," one of the investigators, a sharp-eyed woman named Detective Maria Santos, spoke up. "We've been to every shelter in the city, every women's resource center, every hospital. We've checked police records, morgues, everything. It's like she vanished into thin air." "People don't just vanish." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Sarah Montgomery is entitled to over $1 billion. Her grandfather spent his dying days trying to find her, trying to make up for the fact that she grew up alone when she should have been raised in luxury. I will not let her slip through our fingers now. We're doing everything we can, sir," another investigator assured him. "We've even posted her photo on social media, offering a reward for information. Someone will recognize her." "Double the reward," Richard said immediately. "Make it $1 million for anyone who can lead us to Sarah Montgomery. Someone out there knows where she is." What they didn't know was that Sarah had given the hospital a fake name. Scared, traumatized, believing she was worthless and unwanted, Sarah had registered as Sarah Mitchell, her foster name, instead of her legal name, Sarah Montgomery, which she'd only recently discovered on her original birth certificate. She'd found the document years ago in her foster care file, but had never thought much about the name Montgomery. It was just another reminder of the parents who'd abandoned her. She had no idea that name was her ticket to everything. Sarah sat in the tiny room at St. Mary's Women's Shelter, nursing Emma and trying not to cry. The shelter had taken her in after her second hospital stay. The emergency surgery to repair her torn incision had been successful, but it had left her even weaker and with a mountain of medical debt she could never hope to pay. The hospital social worker, Mrs. Patterson, had been kind enough to connect her with St. Mary's. The shelter provided a bed, 3 meals a day, and basic supplies for Emma. But Sarah knew she couldn't stay forever. The shelter had a 3-month limit. And then what? She had no job, no references. Marcus had been her only contact, and she'd rather die than call him. No education beyond high school. No money except the $7 she'd had in her purse that night. Every night, Sarah would hold Emma close and whisper her dreams into her baby's tiny ears. "Someday, sweet girl, we'll have a real home. Someday, Mama will give you everything you deserve. You won't grow up like I did, alone and scared. I promise you'll be loved. I promise you'll be safe." Emma would coo and gurgle, looking up at her mother with complete trust, and Sarah's heart would break all over again, because how could she keep those promises when she had nothing? Lisa, her friend from the diner, had moved across the country. Sarah had no way to contact her without a phone. Mr. Chun had been kind enough to hold her wet, damaged belongings, but they contained nothing of value. Just some ruined clothes and a few photographs. Sarah was utterly, completely alone. Except for Emma. And Emma was everything. During the day, Sarah would attend the shelter's job training program while Emma stayed in the shelter's daycare. Sarah learned typing, basic computer skills, interview techniques. She was determined to build something from nothing. One afternoon, as Sarah practiced typing in the computer lab, one of the other shelter residents, a young woman named Jennifer, called out excitedly from the next computer. "Oh my God! Look at this!" Jennifer turned her screen so the others could see. "There's a reward for finding some missing woman. $1 million. Sarah glanced over without much interest. She'd seen these kinds of posts before, usually about runaways or kidnapping victims. "Who is it?" another woman asked. "Some rich girl named Sarah Montgomery," Jennifer read. "Says she's the heir to some massive fortune, but they can't find her. Dang. Imagine having $1 billion and not even knowing it." Sarah's hands froze on the keyboard. Montgomery. That was the name on her birth certificate. The name she'd discovered years ago but never understood. She'd always gone by her foster surname, Mitchell. "Let me see that," Sarah said quietly, moving closer to Jennifer's computer. There on the screen was a photograph. But it wasn't a recent photo. It was an age-progressed image based on a baby picture. The face looked vaguely like Sarah's, but different enough that she wasn't certain. "Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery," Jennifer read aloud. "Born March 15th, 24 years ago. Placed for adoption 3 days after birth. If you have any information about her whereabouts, contact Montgomery Law Associates." Sarah's mind raced. March 15th. That was her birthday. Placed for adoption 3 days after birth. That matched her story. Her foster record said she'd been found at a hospital with a note pinned to her blanket and a birth certificate that said, Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery. But it couldn't be her, could it? Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Imagine being that girl and not knowing you're rich, Jennifer laughed. Like some kind of fairy tale. Sarah's hands trembled. She memorized the phone number on the screen. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah borrowed one of the shelter phones and dialed the number with shaking fingers. It rang 3 times. Montgomery Law Associates. This is Richard Montgomery speaking. Sarah's voice came out barely above a whisper. Hi, I saw the post about Sarah Montgomery. Yes. Richard's voice immediately became alert. Intense. Do you have information? I think I might be her. But I'm probably wrong. I'm sure there's a mistake. What is your full name? Richard interrupted. Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery. But I go by Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell. That's my foster name. What's your birth date? March 15th, 24 years ago. Were you placed for adoption as an infant? Yes. I was found at a hospital with just a birth certificate. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Richard's voice came back, thick with emotion. Sarah, we've been looking everywhere for you. Can you tell me where you are right now? I'm at St. Mary's Women's Shelter on 4th Street. But sir, I don't understand. Why were you looking for me? Because your grandfather, your real grandfather, William Montgomery, he spent the last years of his life trying to find you. He never stopped searching. And he left you everything. Sarah, you're the sole heir to the Montgomery estate. Sarah felt the room spinning. I don't understand. How much is everything? Approximately $1.2 billion plus controlling interest in Montgomery Enterprises, real estate holdings, investments. Sarah, you're one of the wealthiest young women in America. The phone slipped from Sarah's hand and clattered to the floor. This couldn't be real. Couldn't be. The next day, Sarah's transformation begins. Richard Montgomery arrived at St. Mary's Shelter at 8 o'clock the next morning with a team of lawyers, a DNA testing kit, and a determination to protect Sarah from anyone who might try to take advantage of her. They ran the DNA test on the spot, comparing Sarah's DNA to the samples they had from William Montgomery's medical records. 3 hours later, the results came back. 99.97% match. Sarah Montgomery was exactly who she claimed to be. Richard sat across from Sarah in the shelter's small meeting room, Emma sleeping peacefully in her car seat beside her mother's chair. "Sarah," Richard began gently, "I need to explain everything to you. Your father was David Montgomery, William's only son. David fell in love with a woman named Elizabeth Hayes, your mother. William didn't approve of the relationship because Elizabeth came from a working-class family. He forbade David from marrying her." Sarah listened, tears already forming in her eyes. "But David loved Elizabeth anyway. When she got pregnant with you, they decided to run away together. They were planning to move across the country and start fresh. But 3 days after you were born," Richard paused, his own eyes misting, "they were killed in a car accident. Both of them died instantly." "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her hand covering her mouth. William was devastated. He realized he'd been a fool. He'd driven his son away with his pride and snobbery. And when he went to find you, his granddaughter, the adoption agency wouldn't release any information. The records were sealed. He tried everything, lawyers, investigators, even questionable methods. But he couldn't find you. "So I was put in foster care," Sarah said quietly, "because he couldn't find me." Yes, and William never forgave himself. He spent the rest of his life searching. Every birthday he would have investigators renew the search. He set up a trust fund for you that grew and grew. And when he died 6 months ago, he left specific instructions. "Find Sarah. Give her everything. Make sure she knows she was loved, even if she never knew it." Sarah was sobbing now. "I thought I was abandoned. I thought nobody wanted me. I spent my whole life thinking I wasn't good enough for anyone to keep." Richard reached across the table and took her hand. "Sarah, you were wanted. You were loved. Your parents loved you so much they were willing to give up everything for you. And your grandfather spent his dying days trying to find you. You were never unwanted. Never." Emma stirred in her sleep, making a tiny sound, and Sarah looked down at her daughter with fresh understanding. "I know exactly how my father felt now," she whispered. "I would do anything for my daughter. I would fight the whole world for her. And now you have the resources to give her everything," Richard said gently. "Sarah, as of this moment you control a billion-dollar fortune. You own Montgomery Enterprises, a real estate development company with projects across the country. You own properties, investments, stocks. You have a mansion in the Upper East Side, a beach house in the Hamptons, a penthouse in Los Angeles. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes." Sarah looked around the tiny shelter room with its peeling paint and second-hand furniture. Then she looked at Emma, her precious daughter, the only good thing to come from her time with Marcus. "I want to do something good with it," she said firmly. "My grandfather spent his whole life making money. I want to spend mine making a difference." Richard smiled. "I think William would have liked that very much." 1 week later, the transformation was stunning. Within 7 days, Sarah went from a homeless single mother to one of the most powerful business owners in the city. Richard and his team worked around the clock to transfer all assets into her name, set up security measures, hire a personal assistant, and ensure Sarah was protected from the swarm of opportunists who would inevitably come crawling out of the woodwork. They moved her into the Montgomery mansion, a sprawling estate with 12 bedrooms, a staff of housekeepers, a nursery that looked like something from a fairy tale, and security that rivaled the White House. Sarah walked through the marble halls holding Emma, overwhelmed by the opulence. "This was my grandfather's house?" she whispered. "Your house now," Richard corrected gently. "Sarah, you need to understand something. You're not just rich. You're powerful. Montgomery Enterprises has contracts with the city, with the state, with some of the biggest companies in America. You have influence now." "I don't know anything about running a company," Sarah said nervously. "You'll learn, and you'll have help." "But Sarah," Richard's expression became serious. "There's something you need to know. One of our subsidiary companies, Walker Real Estate, they're one of our contractors. We do business with them. Sarah's blood ran cold. Walker? As in Patricia Walker. You know her. She was. Sarah couldn't even form the words. Her son is Emma's father. He threw us out. She convinced him I was lying about everything. She destroyed my life. Richard's jaw tightened. Then you need to know that Walker Real Estate owes Montgomery Enterprises over $50 million in contracted projects. And Patricia Walker has been embezzling from those projects for years. Your grandfather knew but couldn't prove it. But now, with you in charge and fresh eyes on the books, Sarah, you have the power to destroy her. Sarah looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her arms. I don't want to destroy anyone, she said quietly. I just want the truth to come out. Sometimes those are the same thing, Richard said. Marcus Walker sat in his mother's luxurious office, listening to her rant about their latest business problem. I don't understand it, Patricia fumed. Montgomery Enterprises is demanding a full audit of all our projects. They've never done this before. What changed? Maybe they finally caught on to your creative accounting? Marcus muttered. Patricia shot him a venomous look. Watch yourself. That creative accounting has kept us living in luxury. Marcus had been miserable for the past month. Ever since that night in the rain. Ever since he'd thrown Sarah out. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He couldn't stop seeing Sarah's face. The betrayal, the fear, the pain, and the baby, Emma. His mother insisted she wasn't his. The test had proved it. But Marcus had started having doubts. He'd secretly reached out to the hospital, asking about the paternity test his mother claimed to have ordered. There was no record of it. No test had ever been performed. His mother had lied. And if she'd lied about that, what else had she lied about? Marcus? Marcus, are you even listening to me? Marcus looked up at his mother, and for the first time in his life he saw her clearly. Not as the powerful, protective figure she pretended to be, but as the manipulative, cruel woman she actually was. Where did you get the paternity test? He asked suddenly. Patricia blinked. What? The paternity test you showed me. The one that said Emma wasn't mine. Where did it come from? From the hospital, obviously. I already told you. The hospital has no record of it, Marcus said flatly. I checked. Patricia's face went pale for just a moment before she recovered. Then they made a mistake in their records. It doesn't matter. That girl is gone. Good riddance. She has a name, Marcus said quietly. Sarah. And our daughter's name is Emma. She's not your. Yes, she is, Marcus shouted, standing up. I know she is. I've always known. You lied to me. You made up evidence. You convinced me to throw away the only real thing I've ever had. I saved you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Patricia shot back. That girl was trash. She was nothing. You're a Walker. You were supposed to marry Victoria Ashford and merge our families. Instead, you were playing house with some waitress. She was kind. Marcus roared. She was good. She loved me. And I loved her. And you took that away from me. I did what any mother would do. I protected my son. You destroyed my life. Before Patricia could respond, there was a sharp knock on the door. Mrs. Walker? There are some people here to see you. They say it's urgent. Patricia smoothed her suit jacket, composing herself. Send them in. The door opened, and Sarah Montgomery walked in. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Sarah. But not the Sarah he remembered. This Sarah wore an elegant designer suit. Her hair was professionally styled. She carried herself with a confidence he'd never seen before. And in her arms, she held Emma, his daughter, now a month old and absolutely beautiful. Hello, Patricia. Hello, Marcus, Sarah said calmly. Marcus couldn't speak. He could only stare. Patricia recovered first. What are you doing here? How did you even get past security? I own this building, Sarah said simply. What? Patricia laughed. You're delusional. Get out before I call the police. Actually, Richard Montgomery stepped into the room behind Sarah. My client is quite serious. Sarah Montgomery owns the Montgomery estate, which includes Montgomery Enterprises, which holds the mortgage on this building. As of this morning, we've begun foreclosure proceedings. Patricia's face went from red to white. Montgomery? Your client's name is Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell. That's my foster name, Sarah said quietly. My real name, my legal name, is Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery. I'm the sole heir to the Montgomery fortune. I'm also the majority stakeholder in the company you've been stealing from for 3 years. Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe. Sarah, I don't... What? Sarah turned to look at Marcus for the first time. Her eyes, those kind, trusting eyes he'd once loved, were now cool and guarded. Hello, Marcus. It's been a while. Sarah, I've been looking for you. I've been trying to find you. I know now that my mother lied. I know Emma is mine. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The words tumbled out desperately. You're sorry. Sarah's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. You threw me out into the rain when I was 3 days post-surgery. You threw your newborn daughter out into a storm. You believed lies about me without even asking for proof. You chose your mother's poison over the woman who loved you. And now you're sorry. Yes, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, Sarah, please give me another chance. Let me make this right. Make it right. Sarah's eyes flashed. Marcus, I passed out from blood loss in a convenience store. I lived in a homeless shelter with our daughter. I had nothing. Because you believed I was a liar and a cheat without ever bothering to verify the truth. I know, and I hate myself for it. Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now. Please, I'll do anything. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at Emma, who was awake and looking around with curious eyes. There's nothing you can do, Marcus. The damage is done. She turned to Patricia, who looked like she might have a heart attack. As for you, Mrs. Walker, my lawyers have uncovered extensive evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and breach of contract. You stole over $15 million from Montgomery projects over the last 3 years. We're pressing charges. You can't prove anything, Patricia snarled. Actually, we can. Richard held up a thick folder. Financial records, falsified documents, witness testimonies from your own employees who were afraid to come forward before. It's all here. Patricia's empire was crumbling before her eyes. You're just a nobody, a foster kid. You don't have the power. I have exactly the power my grandfather left me, Sarah interrupted. And I'm using it to make sure people like you can't hurt anyone else the way you hurt me. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Marcus? About Emma. Marcus looked up hopefully. Yes. My lawyers will be in touch about establishing paternity and arranging custody. You'll have supervised visitation rights once we've confirmed through legal DNA testing that you're her father. I'm not going to keep Emma from you, but you're going to have to earn the right to be in her life. Being a father isn't about biology. It's about showing up. It's about protecting your family. It's about choosing love over lies. I will, Marcus said desperately. I promise. I'll prove to you that I can be the man you deserved. The father Emma deserves. We'll see, Sarah said simply. And then she walked out, her head held high, her baby safe in her arms, leaving Marcus to face the ruins of the life his mother had built on lies. 2 months later, the custody hearing was surprisingly simple. The DNA test proved what Marcus had known in his heart all along. Emma was his daughter. But Sarah's lawyers presented a compelling case. Marcus had abandoned his daughter. He'd thrown her out without verification of his mother's claims. He'd chosen blind belief over investigation. The judge was not sympathetic. Mr. Walker, the judge said sternly, you threw a 3-day-old infant out into a storm based on falsified evidence. You didn't verify. You didn't investigate. You simply believed what you wanted to believe because it was easier than standing up to your mother. Marcus stood with his head bowed. I know, Your Honor. I was wrong. Completely wrong. However, the judge continued, I also believe that children benefit from having both parents in their lives when possible. Ms. Montgomery has graciously agreed to allow supervised visitation, which will transition to unsupervised visitation after 6 months if you complete parenting classes and therapy. I will, Your Honor. I'll do whatever it takes. The judge nodded. See that you do. This child deserves better than what you showed her in her first days of life. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Marcus approached Sarah carefully. Thank you, he said quietly, for not keeping Emma from me. I don't deserve your kindness. You're right. You don't, Sarah said bluntly. But Emma deserves to know her father. If you can become the man I thought you were when we met, if you can be honest and kind and strong enough to stand up for what's right, then she deserves to have that person in her life. What about us? Marcus asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Is there any chance? No, Sarah said firmly but not unkindly. Marcus, you showed me exactly who you are when things got hard, and I believe people can change, but I also believe in protecting myself and my daughter. We're not a family. We're co-parents. That's all we'll ever be. Marcus nodded, accepting this painful truth. I understand. Can I at least see her? My first official visit. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. 1 hour. In the park across the street. Richard will supervise. They walked to the park together. Sarah carefully handed Emma to Marcus. His first time holding his daughter since the night she was born. Marcus looked down at Emma's little face, at her dark eyes and tiny nose, and he broke down sobbing. I'm so sorry, baby girl, he whispered. Daddy was so wrong. But I promise you, I swear to you, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for it. I'm going to be the father you deserve. I promise. Emma grabbed his finger with her tiny hand and held on tight. And for just a moment Marcus allowed himself to hope that maybe, someday he could earn his way back to being part of their lives. But he knew it would take years. And he knew he might never succeed. But he was going to try. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the balcony of her penthouse, looking out over the city as the sun set in brilliant oranges and pinks. Emma was in her arms, now 7 months old, babbling happily and reaching for the birds flying past. Look at that, sweetheart, Sarah whispered. Look at how beautiful the world is. So much had changed in 6 months. Patricia Walker was in prison, serving 15 years for fraud and embezzlement. Her company had been dissolved, her assets seized. Marcus had completed his therapy and parenting classes. He saw Emma every weekend now, unsupervised, and Sarah could see he was genuinely trying to be better. He'd cut all ties with his mother. He'd started volunteering at a women's shelter, trying to understand the harm his actions had caused. He sent Sarah respectful messages about Emma's development, never pushing for more than she was willing to give. He was becoming a good father. But Sarah knew she would never let him back into her heart. That door was closed forever. Sarah herself had thrown herself into running Montgomery Enterprises. She discovered she had a natural talent for business, but more importantly, she had a vision. Using her grandfather's fortune to help people like her, she'd established the Montgomery Foundation, which provided housing for homeless mothers and their children. She'd partnered with foster care agencies to provide college scholarships for former foster kids. She'd opened free childcare centers in low-income neighborhoods. She was doing what her grandfather never had a chance to do, using wealth to make real change. Ms. Montgomery? Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Chun is here to see you. Sarah smiled. Send him up. A few minutes later, Mr. Chun from the convenience store walked onto the balcony, looking around in awe at the luxurious space. Mr. Chun. Sarah greeted him warmly. Thank you so much for coming. I still can't believe it. Mr. Chun laughed. The young lady who collapsed in my store is now one of the richest people in the city. I never got to properly thank you, Sarah said seriously. If you hadn't helped me that night, if you hadn't called the ambulance, I don't know what would have happened. Anyone would have done the same. But you did it, and that matters. Sarah handed him an envelope. Mr. Chun opened it and gasped. Inside was a check for $1 million. Ms. Sarah, I can't accept this. It's not a gift, Sarah said gently. It's an investment. I want to help you open your own chain of stores. You saved my life. Let me help change yours." Mr. Chen's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After he left, Sarah stood alone with Emma, looking out over the city where she'd once wandered homeless and bleeding. "You know what, baby girl?" Sarah whispered to her daughter. "I thought being thrown out that night was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But it led me here, to the truth about my family, to my grandfather's legacy, to the chance to make a real difference." Emma cooed and grabbed Sarah's necklace, a locket with a photo of William Montgomery inside. "I wish I could have met him," Sarah said softly, looking at the locket. "I wish I could have known my parents. But I think they'd be proud of who I've become, of who we're becoming together." Her phone buzzed with a message from Lisa, her old friend from the diner, who Sarah had reconnected with and helped move back to the city. "Lisa, dinner tonight? I want to hear all about the new shelter you're opening." Sarah smiled and typed back, "Absolutely, 7 p.m. She had a family now, not the traditional kind, not the one she dreamed of having with Marcus, but a family nonetheless. She had Emma, the love of her life. She had Richard, her grandfather's friend, who had become like a father to her. She had Lisa, her sister in everything but blood. She had Mr. Chun, who'd shown kindness to a stranger. She had a whole community of people at the shelter who looked up to her, who she was helping build better lives. And most importantly, she had herself. Sarah Mitchell Montgomery, the foster kid who'd grown up believing she was unwanted, now knew the truth. She had always been loved. Her parents had loved her enough to risk everything. Her grandfather had loved her enough to never stop searching. And she loved herself enough to build something beautiful from the ashes of her pain. "Come on, Emma," Sarah said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Let's go inside. We have so much life to live." As Sarah walked inside her penthouse, her home, she passed a mirror and caught sight of her reflection. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Gone was the scared, uncertain girl who'd been thrown into the rain. In her place stood a strong, confident woman who'd survived the worst and come out stronger. A woman who'd taken unimaginable pain and turned it into purpose. A woman who would make damn sure her daughter never felt unwanted for a single day of her life. A woman who'd inherited more than just money. She'd inherited the strength to forgive, the wisdom to move forward, and the grace to help others along the way. Sarah smiled at her reflection. And then she walked forward into her future, her daughter in her arms, ready to face whatever came next. Because she was Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery, and she was unstoppable. Emma's second birthday party was held at the Montgomery estate, and it was a joyful chaos of children, balloons, and laughter. Marcus was there, having earned his place as a permanent fixture in Emma's life. He'd never stopped working on himself, never stopped trying to be better. He watched Sarah from across the lawn. She was laughing with a group of mothers from one of her shelters, completely at ease, absolutely radiant. He'd never stopped loving her. But he'd accepted that some mistakes can't be undone. Some trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. So he contented himself with being the best father he could be to Emma, and being grateful that Sarah was generous enough to let him have that. "Daddy! Daddy, watch!" Emma toddled over, her little face bright with joy, holding a balloon. Marcus scooped her up, his heart overflowing. "I'm watching, princess. You're doing so great." Sarah caught his eye across the lawn and smiled. Not a romantic smile, but one of acknowledgement. They'd come so far. They'd both grown so much. They would never be together. But they were both good parents. And Emma would grow up knowing she was loved by both of them. That was enough. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Sarah stood in the garden, watching the sunset with Emma sleeping against her shoulder. Richard approached, moving slower these days but still sharp as ever. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you, Sarah," he said softly. "I hope so," Sarah replied. "I'm trying to honor his legacy while making my own path." "You're doing more than that. You're healing wounds, your own and others. That takes remarkable strength." Sarah looked down at Emma, at her perfect, peaceful face. "She gives me strength," Sarah whispered. "Every day. She reminds me why I survived, why I fought, why I keep going. She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one." As the last rays of sunlight faded and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah made a silent promise. To her grandfather she'd never met, to her parents who'd died too young, to the scared girl she'd once been, and to the strong woman she'd become. "I will never forget where I came from. I will never forget the rain, the pain, the fear. But I will also never let it define me. I will use my story to help others write better endings to theirs. I will teach Emma that true wealth isn't money. It's kindness, resilience, and the courage to stand up after you've been knocked down. I will make sure no mother ever has to stand alone in the rain with her baby, wondering if she'll survive the night. I will use my privilege to lift others up. I will be the person I needed when I had no one. This is my promise. This is my purpose. This is my legacy." And as Sarah Montgomery walked back into her home, her sleeping daughter in her arms, she knew that every hardship she'd endured had led her to this moment. She'd been thrown out into the rain, but she'd emerged from the storm stronger than anyone could have imagined. And now, she was using that strength to make sure no one else would ever face that storm alone. Sure, no one else would ever face that storm alone. The Montgomery Foundation headquarters opened on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 2 years after that terrible night in the rain. Sarah stood at the podium in front of hundreds of people. Former foster children, homeless mothers who'd found refuge in her shelters, community leaders, politicians, and yes, even some of the wealthy elite who'd once ignored her existence. Emma sat in the front row with Lisa, clapping her little hands excitedly even though she didn't understand what was happening. Marcus sat a few rows back, watching with pride and regret intermingled on his face. 2 years ago, Sarah began, her voice steady and clear, I stood in the rain with my newborn daughter, having just been thrown out by the man I loved, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I had $3 in my pocket, a body that was literally falling apart, and a baby who depended on me for everything. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I thought that was the end of my story. I thought I would become another statistic, another single mother who couldn't make it, another foster kid who never found her place in the world. But something incredible happened instead. Sarah's eyes swept across the audience. I found out who I really was. Not just my name or my inheritance, but who I was at my core. I discovered I was stronger than I ever imagined. I learned that the worst moments of our lives can become the foundation for our greatest triumphs. And I realized that my pain had given me a purpose. She gestured to the building behind her. A beautiful modern structure with huge windows and welcoming doors. This building will house over 200 families. Single mothers, fathers, people who've aged out of foster care, domestic violence survivors. Anyone who needs a safe place to rebuild their lives. But it's more than just housing. We're providing job training, childcare, education, counseling, legal services, everything needed to break the cycle of poverty and trauma. The crowd erupted in applause. When the noise died down, Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. I can't save everyone. I can't fix every broken system. But I can make sure that when a mother stands in the rain with her baby, scared and alone, she has somewhere to go. I can make sure that foster children know they're not forgotten. I can make sure that people who've been thrown away by society have someone who believes in them. She paused, looking directly at Emma. My daughter will grow up knowing that her mother was once homeless. She'll know that we lived in a shelter, that we had nothing. And I'm going to teach her that those experiences don't define us. They refine us. They show us what really matters. Sarah's voice grew stronger. To everyone watching who's ever been told you're not enough, who's ever been thrown away, who's ever felt invisible, I see you. Your life matters. Your story matters. And with hard work, with support, with people who believe in you, you can write a new ending. The applause was thunderous now, people rising to their feet. But Sarah held up her hand, because she had one more thing to say. I also want to say something about forgiveness. Her eyes found Marcus in the crowd. The person who hurt me most has spent 2 years trying to make amends. He's gone to therapy. He's taken parenting classes. He's volunteered his time and money to causes that help people like me. He's tried to become better. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. I will never forget what happened. I will never be able to trust him the way I once did. We will never be together. But, Sarah's voice softened. I can acknowledge his growth. I can allow him to be a good father to our daughter. Because holding on to anger would only poison me, and I refuse to let bitterness steal my joy. She looked back at the audience. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting people off the hook. It means refusing to let your pain control your future. It means choosing peace over perpetual war. Sarah smiled. A real, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. 2 years ago, I was thrown into the rain. Today, I'm standing in the sunshine. And I'm bringing as many people with me as I can. The crowd rose as one, applauding, cheering, many crying openly. After the ceremony, as people toured the new facility, Marcus approached Sarah carefully. That was incredibly generous what you said about me, he said quietly. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. He changed so much. The entitled, weak man who'd bent to his mother's will was gone. In his place was someone who'd done the hard work of becoming better. You've earned it, Sarah said simply. You're a good father to Emma. You show up. You're consistent. You're kind. That's all I ever wanted from you. I know I can never. Marcus, Sarah interrupted gently. You don't need to keep apologizing. I've forgiven you, not for your sake but for mine. I refuse to carry that weight anymore. Marcus nodded, his eyes glistening. Thank you. For everything. For giving me the chance to know Emma. For being so much stronger than I ever was. You're welcome. Now go spend time with your daughter. She's been asking for you. As Marcus walked away to scoop Emma into his arms, Richard appeared at Sarah's side. That was quite a speech, he said warmly. I meant every word. I know you did. Your grandfather would have burst with pride seeing you today. Sarah smiled sadly. I wish I could have known him. In a way, you did. Every time you help someone, every time you choose compassion over cruelty, every time you stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves, that's William's legacy living through you. That's his second chance to get it right. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Do you think he really would have loved me? If he'd found me when I was little? Sarah. Richard took her hand. He spent 24 years searching for you. He never gave up. Even when everyone told him it was hopeless, he kept looking. He left you everything not because of obligation, but because he loved you before he ever met you. You were his second chance at family, at love, at doing things right. Yes, he would have loved you. He did love you. Sarah let the tears fall freely now. Healing tears. Grateful tears. Thank you, Richard. For everything. For finding me. For protecting me. For being the grandfather figure I never had. It's been my honor, Richard said, his own voice breaking. Watching you blossom into this remarkable woman has been the privilege of my life. 1 year later, Emma's 3rd birthday was a small, intimate affair at the beach house in the Hamptons. Just family, which now included Lisa and her new husband, Richard and his wife, Mr. Chan and his family, several of the mothers from Sarah's first shelter who'd become dear friends, and yes, Marcus. Emma ran along the beach, laughing as the waves chased her tiny feet, her dark curls bouncing in the sea breeze. Sarah watched from the porch, a cup of tea in her hands. Peace settled deep in her bones. Penny for your thoughts? Lisa asked, joining her. Just thinking about how far we've come, Sarah said softly. 3 years ago, I was sleeping in a shelter. Now look at us. Now you're changing the world, Lisa said with pride. Seriously, Sarah, the foundation has helped over 5,000 people. 5,000. You've given them homes, jobs, hope. You're a superhero. Sarah laughed. I'm just a woman who got lucky and decided to pay it forward. You're more than that, and you know it. They watched Emma play for a while in comfortable silence. Have you thought any more about dating? Lisa asked carefully. It's been 3 years. You deserve happiness too, you know? Sarah shrugged. Maybe someday, but honestly, I'm happy now. I have Emma. I have my work. I have all of you. I don't need romance to feel complete. But would you be open to it? If the right person came along. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but they'd have to be pretty special. Someone who sees me for who I am, not what I have. Someone who values kindness over wealth. Someone who... Mommy, come play. Emma's voice interrupted, and Sarah's face lit up. Duty calls, she laughed, setting down her tea and running down to the beach. She scooped Emma up and spun her around, both of them laughing, the ocean sparkling behind them like a million diamonds. Marcus watched from further down the beach, a bittersweet smile on his face. He'd brought his new girlfriend, a kind woman named Rachel who worked at a nonprofit. She was nothing like Victoria or his mother's expectations. She was real, genuine, and most importantly, she was good with Emma. They're beautiful together, Rachel said softly. They are, Marcus agreed. Sarah's an amazing mother. You still love her, don't you? Marcus was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I probably always will, but I've accepted that some doors close forever. The best thing I can do now is be a good father and a good man. That's my redemption. Rachel squeezed his hand. For what it's worth, I think you're doing a great job at both. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, everyone gathered on the beach for Emma's birthday cake. Make a wish, sweetheart, Sarah encouraged as Emma stared at the 3 candles with wide eyes. Emma squeezed her eyes shut tight, her little face scrunched up in concentration, then blew with all her might. The candles flickered and died. What did you wish for? Lisa asked. Can't tell or it won't come true, Emma said seriously, and everyone laughed. But Sarah knew what her own wish would have been, if this were her birthday. Thank you, for the pain that made me strong, for the struggle that taught me empathy, for the darkness that showed me how to be light for others, for Emma, who saved me as much as I saved her, for second chances and new beginnings, for learning that wealth isn't in bank accounts but in the lives we touch and the love we share. Thank you for throwing me into the rain, because I emerged from that storm as someone I'm proud to be. As the party wound down and stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Sarah stood at the water's edge, Emma asleep in her arms. Look at those stars, baby girl, Sarah whispered. Your great-grandfather used to look at these same stars, wishing he could find me. Your mommy used to look at them from shelter windows, wondering if life would ever get better. And now here we are, in a beautiful home, surrounded by people who love us, with the resources to help so many others. Emma stirred slightly but didn't wake. I want you to remember something as you grow up, Sarah continued softly. Life isn't about what happens to you. It's about what you do with what happens to you. Bad things will come, they come for everyone. But you have the power to decide what those bad things turn you into. Will they turn you bitter or better? Vengeful or victorious? Broken or beautiful? I chose beautiful, Emma, and I'm going to teach you to make the same choice. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead and turned back toward the house, where lights glowed warm and welcoming, where friends and family waited, where home was. She paused at the porch steps and looked back one more time at the ocean, at the vast expanse of possibility stretching to the horizon. And she smiled, because Sarah Montgomery, former foster child, former homeless mother, former victim, had become something else entirely. She'd become a warrior. She'd become a healer. She'd become a light in the darkness. She'd become exactly who she was always meant to be. And as she carried her sleeping daughter inside, surrounded by love and purpose and peace, Sarah knew that her story, their story, was just beginning. The rain had washed away the old Sarah. The storm had forged a new one. And the sunshine that followed, that was hers to share with the world. Thank you so much for watching this incredible journey from darkness to light. Sarah's story reminds us that our worst moments don't define us. They refine us. That pain can become purpose, and that with courage, we can turn our tragedies into triumphs. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. We have so many more inspiring stories coming your way. Hit that like button, Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you thought of Sarah's journey. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of hope today. Remember, no matter how dark the storm, the sun is always waiting on the other side. You are stronger than you know, more valuable than you believe, and more powerful than you imagine. Until next time, keep believing in better days ahead.